Our thanks to all the patrons who've been so generous in their support of the Cyberwire. We're happy to have added a new benefit this week. Members of the Producers Circle now receive exclusive access to our new quarterly report. If you'd like to see a sample, go to thecyberwire.com/quarterly report. And thanks again to our patrons. Amazon Web Services has a timely reminder. Check your cloud's configuration. Hacks now seem to affect revenue for years. A rundown of some new threats and vulnerabilities. We've got some insights into the criminal carding market and the training it offers. We've got some patch news. And forget about Mayweather-McGregor. The pay-per-view we'd sign up for is Putin-Wittes. I'd like to tell you about some tactics and techniques from our sponsor Cylance. Cylance will be offering a short course at Black Hat on leveraging artificial intelligence and the ELK stack for targeted threat hunting. You've heard about AI, the ELK stack, and threat hunting. Now learn what they are and what they can mean for the defense of your enterprise. In this course, you'll learn how to create your own enterprise-wide hunting platform using ELK with data enrichment feeds, and how to set up an ELK server to facilitate powerful hunting, and how to collect data efficiently from every endpoint on your network fast. So don't just look for threats, get out and hunt them. Check out the presentation on Wednesday, July 26th from 4:10 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon at Business Hall Theater B, Level 1. Cylance, it's where you'll find the next generation of cybersecurity. Learn more at cylance.com under their events section. And we thank Cylance for sponsoring our show. Major funding for the Cyberwire podcast is provided by Cylance. I'm Dave Bittner in Baltimore with your Cyberwire summary for Thursday, July 20th, 2017. Amazon Web Services has sent its customers a reminder that access control lists, those are ACLs, they govern who can see the content of their S3 buckets, and that they should look at their buckets to ensure that public read access is enabled only where it's supposed to be. Misconfiguration, often by third parties, has hit data held by large organizations hard this summer, but AWS wants customers to remember that protecting information from inadvertent exposure isn't that hard. So, an S3 bucket isn't exactly a set-it-and-forget-it Ronco toaster oven, but really it's not that complicated. TalkTalk's revenues declined in the first quarter, and analysts attribute this in large measure to the breach the telco sustained in 2015. This report suggests effects of cyber attacks can linger, a lesson worth considering in the wake of NotPetya, particularly with respect to its effects on shipping and manufacturing. TalkTalk, whose breach is nearly 2 years old, is still suffering. It reported a 3.2% slip in revenue in the first quarter this year. Its CEO at the time of the incident was Baroness Dido Harding, who left her job at the beginning of April. The proximate cause of the revenue decline is given as recontracting consumer customers to new, lower-cost, fixed-rate plans. Some new threats and vulnerabilities are worth a mention. Malformed Windows MSI files are now known to infect Linux systems too. Researchers call the vulnerability bad taste. CyberArk's Red Team reports a form of domain fronting that can mask attackers' command and control traffic. It abuses content delivery networks and high-traffic domains. Domain fronting uses different domain names at different layers of communication. The technique, CyberArk says, is in use in the wild and can be applied to highly targeted attacks. As fears of election hacking persist, the Dark Hotel APT group appears ready to offer a fresh approach to political hacking. The online gang uses whaling, digital certificate factoring, and InXMAR malware in its attacks. In the second cryptocurrency heist reported this week, a hacker stole Ethereum currency worth approximately $30 million by exploiting a vulnerability in a Parity wallet. Parity is working on a fix. This is a distinct attack from the one CoinDash reported earlier this week in the course of its initial token offering. Komodo, the New Jersey-based security firm, warns of a new kind of fish bait being used by criminals in the wild. It's a continuation of the long-running trend of phishing growing more clever and more tightly targeted, almost to the point of spear phishing. This new approach presents the phishing email as a response to an earlier request for information by the victim. Most of the intended marks of the technique are in the U.S., but the approach has been seen in at least 20 other countries. Taking a quick look at our CyberWire event tracker, if you're headed to Black Hat, don't miss Deep Instinct at booth 873. B-Sides Las Vegas is happening July 25th and 26th. You don't want to miss that. ClearedJobs.net is having a Cyber Texas job fair on August 1st. There are cybersecurity summits coming up in Chicago on August 8th and New York on September 15th. And the 8th annual Billington Cybersecurity Summit is coming up September 13th, 2017 in Washington, D.C. You can find all the details and find out how to list your event on our CyberWire event tracker at thecyberwire.com. Cybersecurity is, of course, a rapidly growing industry, attracting innovation and investment, and with that comes a desire by the states to attract and nurture cybersecurity companies, with the high-paying jobs and highly educated people that come with them. Chris Ency is Chief Operating Officer at Dunbar Cybersecurity, and he also co-chairs the Governor's Workforce Development Board Cybersecurity Task Force for the state of Maryland. I asked him about what it takes for states to compete in a hot cybersecurity market. So, you are a Maryland company, as are we here at the CyberWire, and so we have a certain amount of pride of our local accomplishments and so forth. But I'm curious, when you look at the bigger picture of any individual state, when a state tries to compete for cybersecurity dollars, for cybersecurity workforce, what are the kinds of things that states have to take stock of and look toward in terms of investments and being able to attract organizations and people?
So I think the resources that they have in terms of the workforce are oftentimes going to be looked at as one of the lifebloods of any thriving business in this industry. They have to look at, do we have the resources? Are we developing the right talent and skill sets? And can we keep those talented people in the state? So I think Maryland is in a unique position because of our geography almost to retain a lot of localized talent. We've got obviously the influences of the Department of Defense and the intel agencies, Washington, D.C., co-located right next to us. Also a growing set of commercial entities that are focused on opportunities here and beyond. There's a lot of really interesting things happening locally in terms of incubators, startups, new technology that's emerging that's coming either out of government programs, institutions in the academic community, or even just homegrown things that have emerged that are starting to take a national and even a global footprint. That said, I don't want to over sugarcoat it either. I think there's a lot of things we still have to do to take a seat at the table of the best states in the United States that are focused and have resources for cybersecurity.
What are some of the areas where you think a state like Maryland needs to improve?
Well, I think while we've built out some great companies and we've taken a definite noticeable position in the U.S. as a source of cybersecurity talent, mainly due to the fact that we have the federal influence and the centers of excellence here from a security perspective, I think that if you look at the overall ecosystem that's out there of producers of cybersecurity services and products and technology, we would fall kind of far down the list. One of the areas I think that limits Maryland in a sense is that sometimes we do have a myopic focus on the Department of Defense contractors and the type of work that goes into that sector. And I think that at times can maybe detract a little bit from the opportunities that are out there to build global products and solutions that make their mark in terms of the state's place in the competitive landscape of companies that are out there. One of the things I'm always critical of in the state of Maryland, when I look at all these different activities that are going on and different business development initiatives and training programs and grant programs that people are contemplating, is that what are we doing to put all those pieces together? And I think in general, I see a lot of overlapping initiatives. I see a lot of competing interests almost. And I think that's holding us back to a degree. We haven't quite cracked the code on how do we make it so that we're bringing more opportunities to the state at mass scale, using every resource we have in conjunction to make it happen as explosively as possible.
That's Chris Ency from Dunbar Cybersecurity. There have been some more patches this week. Apple has issued patches for macOS, iOS, and Safari, and Oracle has fixed 386 vulnerabilities in its products. Many of Oracle's issues were discovered and reported by security vendor Onapsis. Finally, we're noticing a couple of things these days. First, we're aware that Mayweather and McGregor are holding a round of really interesting joint press conferences in the run-up to their middleweight title bout, as our sports desk keeps telling us. And remember back in the 80s when it was Morning in America? Our Heartland desk does, and they remind us that a candidate for governor of Texas challenged Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi to a duel to the death in a cabin cruiser on the line of death that Colonel Gaddafi drew across the mouth of the Gulf of Sidra. The chosen weapon was Bowie knives. It didn't happen, as far as we know, and the challenger lost the election, but his spirit lives on. We're thinking that spirit lives on in particular over at Lawfare, a blog we often read with interest on cyber legal and cyber policy issues. President Vladimir Putin is a noted martial artist, but the editor of Lawfare, Benjamin Wittes, thinks he's a chump ripe for the dropping. "I'll fight Putin anytime, any place he can't have me arrested," the Extreme editor said back in October 2015. But we think the time is finally right for it now. If the editor can pull it off, we'll set it up on pay-per-view. Now another message about some research from our sponsor Cylance. You know, good policy is informed by sound technical understanding. The crypto wars aren't over. Cylance would like to share some thoughts from ICIT on the surveillance state and censorship and about the conundrum of censorship legislation. They've concluded that recent efforts by governments to weaken encryption, introduce exploitable vulnerabilities into applications, and develop nation-state dragnet surveillance programs will do little to stymie the rise in terrorist attacks. These efforts will be a detriment to national security and only further exhaust law enforcement resources and obfuscate adversary communiques within a massive cloud of noise. Backdoors for the good guys mean backdoors for the bad guys, and it's next to impossible to keep the lone wolves from hearing the howling of the pack. Go to Cylance.com and take a look at their blog for reflections on surveillance, censorship, and security. That's Cylance.com. And we thank Cylance for sponsoring our show. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by Dale Drew. He's the Chief Security Officer at Level 3 Communications. Dale, welcome back. You had an important point to make today, and that was that as we see the evolution of some of these threats, you're seeing that ISPs have some specific responsibilities, and those responsibilities may be growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'd say is, what we're seeing is we're seeing threats becoming much more global, much more often. We're seeing threats that the bad guys want to take advantage of these sort of deep entrenched and deep-rooted protocols and systems that have large-scale impacts across the entire net. And again, WannaCry is a really good example of a single exposure that has a significant sort of global impact. Today, we rely on a very specific set of community members within the security community who are analyzing malware at the application layer to be able to be the eyes and ears for that sort of global problem. And what I'd say is the ISPs are in a very, very unique position to not only be able to detect those exposures, but be able to stop those exposures and then collaborate across networks to be able to get as close to the edge of the bad guy as you possibly can to stop it and figure out where the fingers on the keyboard are. If you look at Level 3 as an example, we are a huge proponent of something called DOTS, which is the DDoS Open Threat Signaling Protocol. Now, that protocol is originally being established to help be able to communicate about DDoS attacks across ISPs, to be able to stop DDoS attacks quickly. But it's more of a signaling protocol on threats. And so you expand a protocol like that to be threat-based, you can push phishing attacks and malware attacks and DOS attacks across the entire network ecosystem and eventually the entire security ecosystem to be able to stop threats. The ISP could also be shutting down command and control systems. We do this once every 2 hours. We find C2s that have significant influence in the industry, and we block the C2. And now ISPs, they're very concerned about blocking internet addresses because they don't know the other purpose that IP address serves. So they tend to be a little gun shy in that. And I think it's time that we start leaning into this problem a lot more.
Are you seeing the adoption of these kinds of techniques by ISPs? Is that collaboration happening? Are people getting on board?
I think today, when the threat level reaches a certain saturation point, that the community comes together and tries to solve it. But it takes a global event right now for us to be able to do that. And that capacity for the entire ecosystem to work together at once is there. That apparatus is available. And I think that we need to get a lot more proactive in being able to stop these threats before they become global problems, and use that entire ecosystem apparatus to make it much more difficult for the bad guy to operate.
Dale Drew, thanks for joining us. And that's the Cyberwire. Thanks to all of our sponsors who make the Cyberwire possible, especially to our sustaining sponsor, Cylance. You can find out more about Cylance and how they can help protect you with artificial intelligence at Cylance.com. The Cyberwire podcast is produced by Pratt Street Media. Our editor is John Petrick. Social media editor is Jennifer Iben. Technical editor is Chris Russell. Executive editor is Peter Kilpie. And I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.